Hello friends, welcome to episode 239 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
You know, I'm doing pretty decently. Had a good dinner. Always love that.
Oh my god, yeah.
That always feels good when you can have a good dinner before the show. Although we've been pretty lucky with decent dinners before shows. So like it's been a hot minute since we've had a bad dinner before show.
We've got a pretty decent Mexican place next to us that I'm kind of addicted to. So when we take dinner, or we take alternating responsibility for providing dinner for the night. And so on my nights, it's kind of convenient to drive past that.
Yeah, it honestly is for you.
Just drop in the order and get it, and it's good stuff. So it's semi-frequently we get to eat from this really nice Mexican place. I get these burrito tacos, and they're just amazing.
Yes. We had our Spotify remix or wrap up.
Yeah,
wrap up came through, which was kind of nice to see.
Yeah,
It's always nice to get metrics that like are a little more complete versus like the month to month, and it was nice to see that we had a considerable amount of growth this year on Spotify specifically.
So there's a couple people on Discord listeners who also said that we were in their top 5. So big shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for loving and supporting.
And just before the show, we got a new listener in our Discord, who actually an existing listener joining us.
What you mean is you adopted a new son. Because they were immediately like, I'm starting a new 7th Sea First Edition campaign, and I have some questions, and you're like, you just pulled them in under your wing, and you're like crying happy tears.
You know, because it's not a common thing, you know? Not everybody says they're into 7th Sea, but when someone's into it, I'm going to, like, literally feed them, like, all of the food they need to help them grow big and strong,
Look,
you know?
Man, no, it's great. I think it's absolutely great.
No. Thank you for joining us, Onography, I guess I'm going to say that right.
Okay.
And I wish you luck on your 7th Sea campaign, and hope the guide that I sent is everything you need it to be. I know for me it was a huge help because when I first started out, it was the traditional like 2nd edition D&D main book, D&D book, and then all these other books kind of feel, right? Because they have it one for every nation, one for every secret society, one, you know, and then there's some errata books and things like that.
You know, White Wolf had kind of popularized that too, where it's like you get the core book, and then here's an individual book for every city, and an individual book for every clan.
Yep. Oh, you wanted the Dark Ages, totally different book.
Oh, different book, different game system.
One of the but what's funny is that 7th Sea is very close to Vampire the Masquerade in the way the characters kind of are built and play out. So it's if you squint hard enough at 7th Sea, you can see it. You can see that dice pool mechanic being there. Well,
even just the character sheets, you fill in dots.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent. Numbers, very reminiscent, especially with virtues and hubrises and things like that.
You mean nature and demeanor?
Yeah, and like humanity is actually like reputation, because you get negative reputation. You know. So there's a lot of things you can squint at and see there. So it was easy for me when I came out of Vampire, going straight to 7th Sea was like, oh, this kind of makes sense.
Your access to magic is dependent upon your bloodline.
Yes, again, right back to blood. It all comes back to it.
Yep.
But so I wish you luck. There's lots going on there. Don't get overwhelmed. That's the one thing I will say. There is a ton of stuff there. But there's a lot of fun. I'll be glad to answer questions because I'm excited about it.
And I'm not kidding, man. He was like practically crying happy tears. If you really seriously you want to have fanboy at him about your campaign, ask him questions about the lore, stuff like that, you have hit the jackpot, because I don't think I've met anyone more enthusiastic about the setting of the game.
Stop it. No, you can keep going.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like someone walking up to me and saying, "Hey, you want to talk about Elder Scrolls for a little bit?" Oh God, do I ever?
Well, it's Elder Scrolls, Dark Souls. Like, you've got your hard loves.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, which I feel terrible about the One System Spotlight. I really do. Like, we looked at that. We really wanted it to be good, but we knew what to expect.
Dark Souls as a role-playing game was never going to be it's really tough. It's a really tough sell. And it would be a very niche game even if you did it correctly.
I come back to, I think Merkborg did it better.
Merkborg did do it better.
They just didn't have lore. Yep. That's pretty much what it came down to. So,
but But no. I mean, look, we're both geeks. We're not without our vices, our little fandoms that we like, you know. So,
True. All right.
Find the right ones.
So we have a topic tonight. Oh, I did want to bring up one other funny thing before the topic.
Yeah.
Because I posted it to you in Discord because I ran across it kind of haphazardly. D&D has a 24/7 show.
You know, here's
live
the thing.
stream.
First off, I didn't know this was happening
Right,
at all. So
right.
like, I saw no advertisement about it whatsoever.
Yeah.
I haven't really paid a lot of attention to D&D lately, though. So I mean, I
agree.
that's
But it's
not,
part of our circles,
but
you know.
it is kind of part of our circle. So we keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
The only thing I saw was up on my YouTube feed. D&D tips or D&D rumors, or one of the D&D channels.
Mm-hmm.
The guy with the beard, and he always usually wears a slouchy cap.
Mm-hmm.
He was on top of a lot of the D&D 1 OGL rumors.
Yes.
I don't remember what the name of his channel is, and I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But I saw a channel, the disastrous launch of the D&D TV channel was the title of the video, and I was like, first off, D&D TV channel, what? Second off, the disastrous launch of it, and then you linked it to me, and I was like, wow, this is like 4 people sitting at a table with...
Now, first off, I'm going to say, for Let's Plays, it's lit well.
Mm-hmm.
The camera angles are good. It is good production quality.
A little bit of character art. You got the character names in little lower thirds.
Yeah, but it feels like it's overproduced for what its contents are.
Mm-hmm.
And like I just feel like they're trying for a lot of content and they're not getting it. You know? And I guess that's the problem with doing just D&D.
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna run out of difference. Of variety.
Well, it's not.
I don't want this to be our topic tonight, but I feel like there's something to. I feel like I wanted to say something about it.
But for me, it's not that though. Like for me, it is you're the official D&D channel, right?
Yeah.
Like, but you're putting out a competing product to Critical Role, to Dimension 20. Okay, I mean just those two alone, right there.
Yeah.
Okay, and you look at the production quality of either of those things.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're the flagship. You are the official D&D channel, and you're going to put out something that tries to compete with either of those two at a much lower production quality. I mean, it is. Look, it's a lot better
Visually,
than I would do.
Right. I would say visually, it's got all the dollar signs behind it for producing it, but like the people involved, and I'm not going to diss the DM. I'm not going to diss the players. Like,
sure,
everybody's cable is different. But there's something to be said about watching a Let's Play and its production that it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the level of a 24/7 live stream from the flagship company. Right? And that's I think, like, that's the stringer that gets me, as I looked at it and I went, this is not your best foot forward. Secondly, it didn't even feel like D&D when I watched it.
Yeah,
I watched a decent amount of it, and I was like, this feels like Dimension 20.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a mimicry of, let's do as much role play as we can and reduce the mechanics. And yet D&D is always mechanics forward in almost everything they do within the product. So it feels so counter, like they're not shining where they want to shine, or where they should.
Yeah. Knox says they're players, not performers, and I mean, I suppose that's true, you know.
But when you're dealing with something like that, you need both.
Yeah, you need a little bit of both.
You really do need both. You need actors who play the game, or you need gamers who can act.
Yeah.
And there are people who do that. There are very qualified people out there who they could flagship for this. Not to get them to do a 24/7 constant stream. I assure you that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is getting them to produce enough content for the right amount of money.
Right.
That's the big thing. They needed like 6 shows to do that right. That this isn't the formatting.
Yeah.
Like, YouTube's great because you can put out 4 videos a day from different creators and you're hitting it. Like, that's a lot of content. If you do 2 videos a day. You're amazing at content creation.
Yeah.
But you do that for a 24/7 stream?
How is that even remotely sustainable?
No way.
Yeah.
No way. That's why I feel like that's just going to die.
Yeah, even
So.
Heatsink says that's why Critical Role did. Critical Role did so well. Everybody already had experience in acting, you know.
Well, not only that, they also didn't produce a 24/7 show. Their shows came out originally, once a week?
Yeah, I mean, it was once a week.
Right. How long was the show?
It was about 4 hours,
Sure.
depending on, where narratively it was okay to make the break. Between 3.5 to 4.5 hours.
Right.
But again, they were all Hollywood voice actor professionals. That's how they all met was voice acting gigs and whatnot.
But even just that, in the content alone, that's not to fill a channel.
Yeah. And then Knox in the Box says that he's never seen Dimension 20, just clips. Are they actors, performers, comics? It's they're all from it's a offshoot of College Humor.
Yeah.
So they're all improv comics.
Yeah.
That have a long history of doing sketch comedy on College Humor's channel.
Yeah.
And then Brennan just started running a D&D game for them basically, and they televised it. So.
Yeah, and it worked out exceptionally well because it's pretty much the same thing.
And because Brennan is one of the best storytellers on the planet, honestly.
He is stupidly brilliant. I'll just leave it at that. All right, we do have a show.
Yeah.
And this was a show that you weren't sure about multiple times over.
So here's the thing. It's this is we each when we brainstorm our list of ideas, we each come up with our own little pet topics. I really want to talk about this one. And this was one you put down on the list.
I did.
So this was a you topic. And that's not to say that I didn't have any investiture in it whatsoever, but this was something that you were I really want to talk about this. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, cool,
Sure.
But you're going to be leading on this one, because it's not a topic that I had strong opinions about. Once we started talking and you were like, okay, so it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. And I was like, all right, I kind of do have a few opinions about this.
You have opinions.
Hold on, wait. If you look at it from this angle, it's like this, and you're like, yeah, there you go, I hooked her.
Yeah. And I feel sometimes that's what it takes. It's just I've just got to figure out where the hook needs to get into you, and then I can just open that brain stream like a zipper, and I love it.
Or what I love is the times where I'm not really invested in the topic, and you say something, you troll me into a response where you say something either jokey or controversial or something like that, and I'm like, hold on, you can't just say that because this and this and this, and you're like, got her, yes.
And I just sit back with my tea and wait.
and then I've written half the show notes.
Yeah, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're talking about tonight is colloquially known as compulsion loop or core loops. Now, the idea of a compulsion loop is pretty simple. It is basically just a habitual chain of activities that are repeated by a user to get them to continue the activity. A la, if I sit at a slot machine at a casino and I put a coin in and pull the lever, that is the action to make the dial spin, make the sounds, and I may make money. And then it will ask me for another coin. So that is the gameplay loop. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's a simple loop because the compulsion is I will win something. Now, for some people, that doesn't do anything for them whatsoever. But for others, it can get pretty driving. In fact, full-on addictions. So we're kind of break that down to understand how that compulsion loop moves into gaming. And what we most recognize that in is video games. But video games weren't the start point. It was there were games prior to that built the compulsion loop.
I mean, I think it's a pretty common thing in gaming across the board. I mean, we've talked a lot before about how it started with games like Dungeons and Dragons and other strategy war games and such like that were play by post and whatnot. But then, from there, we got video gaming as technology advanced and whatnot, and people lifted a lot of those core ideals into their, from D&D into video games, and established a lot of norms there. If you look at a lot of old Elder Scrolls games like Daggerfall, you can definitely see the roots of old 2nd edition D&D in it.
Very much so.
But then that just kind of became the common throughput in
To create the core loop.
Yeah, to create the core loop, and we still see it to this day in our tabletop role playing games too. I think
it's hidden under the covers. We don't recognize it nearly as much. It's not really ever grossly stated.
I'm gonna say again, as I said before, I think it's a lot more prevalent than you give it credit for.
We've reviewed a system spot a month.
Uh-huh.
And I will say, in none of them have I seen it defined.
No. That's the thing, is it's never defined.
Correct.
It is assumed,
Correct.
always. And that's really kind of why we're having this discussion tonight, because this is one of those things that we all take for granted, but it is a fundamental pillar of how we run games and how we, as storytellers, interact with and essentially plot hook our players into this compulsion loop, into this core gameplay loop, and get them to engage with our story and then come back for more.
Because a lot of, especially some of the newer games that are designed by renowned people who've been doing it for decades, they've drifted into this far narrative scale without carrying over the knowledge. The assumption is there.
Yeah.
We see it. But when you look at it, there's no explanation that that's what you must do. So coming into those whole clean, you might not even understand what to do as a storyteller in those situations.
Yes and no. I mean, I don't know. And again, maybe this is me speaking from a place of privilege. I've got 30 years of experience gaming and such like that. But I wonder if it's one of those things that game designers see as so fundamentally, like, obvious. You know, to use an analogy, I used to get frustrated with my math teachers when I was in high school because they would be like, show your work.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, all I did was add 2 plus 2. Do you want me to explain to you that I added 2 plus 2 to get 4 here? And they went, yes. And I'm like, do you think that I didn't know that I needed to add 2 plus 2, that I needed to write it out for you so you marked me down for it? You know, like, it's that fundamental of a thing. I learned how to add 2 plus 2 in kindergarten.
Right.
Okay. And you, as a high school math teacher, are marking me down because I didn't explain that was a step I took.
Correct.
And to me, that's kind of where we are here, where I think that a lot of game designers look at this compulsion loop as so fundamental and so easily understood by the community that, like, when you say things like give them a quest, you know, put monsters in front of them, they're going to fight the monsters, then here's some treasure tables that you can roll on to give them rewards for the treasure. There's that implication that the compulsion loop is how you're going to get through that. You know, that players will want to go on a quest, that players will want to conquer a difficulty of some sort, a boss or a challenge or whatever, and then get a reward out of the end of it, and then they would want to do it again because that reward would enable them to escalate their own power. They would gain levels, they would gain treasure, they would gain magical items and whatnot. They can now fight bigger monsters. You move them on to the next quest.
Correct. And what I say to that is, I literally saw today a post that said, my players want to go fight a red dragon. They definitely can't do it. They definitely can't win. What do I do? And the question is, why do your players want to go fight a red dragon?
Yeah.
Like, what's their motivation?
Yeah.
Like, how did this come about?
More questions than answers there.
Right. But it made me recognize that this storyteller didn't present a loop. They just presented a world.
They just said, there's a red dragon in the world, and the players went, we should punch it.
Right. Like, this is what we know that's out there. Let's go do this thing.
Yeah.
And that starts creating this fundamental concern. So let's talk a little. Let's break down and give a clear example.
Yeah, we
always
start with definitions and whatnot. So what are the bits and pieces we're working with here?
So when we're talking about a compulsion loop, definitionally it's the habitual things. What we're talking about in a mechanical sense is we're talking about having story, having some kind of a conflict, you know, a bit of exploration or conflict or something going on, resources necessary to handle a boss, and then a reward that loops you back to story.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're just following this thing where, like, now that you're at the end of that story piece, you know what's next.
Yeah.
I just received this reward that presents the next thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that, like, in Critical Role's most recent anime that's out.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't, watched through any of the actual series and you've only ever seen it, you can see how the characters are progressing through their loop. That they're like, we have to go take this on. We can't just do that. We must prepare ourselves. Okay? There are challenges in getting the things we need to be prepared to go handle this thing. And that's part and parcel to that basic core loop. One of the games that we play digitally is Monster Hunter.
Monster Hunter.
It's a great game, but its core loop is fundamentally the same as pretty much every other game out there. And I will explain this in a simple way because it can get quite complex within Monster Hunter, but effectively is there is a monster.
Mm-hmm.
You need to take care of it. You need certain gear to be able to counter and or do damage to it.
Mm-hmm.
So first you must go retrieve said gear.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can, which has its own challenges related to it.
Pookie Pookie's a poison monster.
Correct.
You have to build the anti-poison gear.
Right.
You fight Pookie Pookie, and you get gear that makes poison
Poison
stuff happen. Oh, look, the next monster is weak to poison.
Mega Man was the same series.
Exactly. Mega Man 2 was one of my favorite games in the entire world, and it's like, kill Woodman to get the Wood Shield, use the Wood Shield to kill Airman, use to get the air the Air Burster, the Air Burster to kill Crash Man, use the Crash Bombs, etc.,
and you
etc.
again, that's the same thing where you're moving through, and this is prevalent in other loops.
Plenty of other games, yeah.
Stardew Valley is full of these loops. You constantly need to prepare yourself to get the next thing you need to progress in whichever way you're going, whether it's combat, relationships, your farm, whatever. It creates constant loops to make you do this. And there is no difference in doing these in a tabletop game as a storyteller. What I'm saying about this is that, like, in OSR kind of design, the idea of having you go to a location, right, to clean out the problem, you're given a quest to clean out a dungeon. They need something that's at the end, and clearly something's protecting it that this group can't take care of. So they're asking you or paying you to do it. That's your reward. And you know you need this reward because it's either money, in the case of like Shadowrun or whatever, or it's fame, or the person will give you something you need to continue a different quest. But regardless, now you have the challenge of the dungeon, which presents its own problems to get whatever you need to finish said dungeon and leave it. And that's a pretty basic loop.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't change as you move into narrative.
It really doesn't. You have to squint a little bit. But a lot of your things translate one-to-one.
Correct.
But you have to squint because they start becoming intangibles.
Right.
Okay. So if your quote-unquote dungeon, if the boss that you're trying to defeat is something like negotiating peace between two warring factions, okay, that is the boss.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate goal. What is the reward that you get at the end of that? Is it treasure? I don't know, maybe, but it's certainly peace.
Yeah.
It might be accolades from either side.
Mm-hmm. Or even their help in something else.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what is the exploration there? Well, finding inroads to talking to people, trying to figure out what the common ground between these two warring factions is that you can start brokering that peace with. What are the resources? Maybe you need to get certain diplomats on your side. Maybe you need to get one side to agree to certain concessions to the other to start building these inroads. It's not anything as tangible as things like we need healing potions or we need this magic sword to be able to slay the boss. And it's not a straight up combat encounter. It's not as simple and straightforward as if we deplete its hit points to 0, we win. you know? But it's the exact same gameplay loop. You're presented with a challenge, and and you want to overcome that challenge because you see the reward that you will get for it on the other side of it. And so you put yourself on this path to gathering the resources and exploring different avenues with which to conquer that challenge so that you can get the reward on the other side of it.
Exactly. And I think those two words are probably one of the most important things, the resources that you need and reward that you're going to get at the end.
Yeah.
Because it helps define something that I think is one of the hardest things to recognize, and that is the motivation for why even the players are there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about a reward, this isn't something that is intangible. This isn't like there's a chest at the end and there might be something in it. No. That's just stuff that could be meaningless. The players need to understand what their reward is because that's the thing that they're driving to get to the end.
Exactly.
That's the only reason why they're there. They may find other reasons along the way, but that's the reason why they're driving into it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're creating an adventure that has a loop like this, the two pieces you start out with is the reason why you're sending them there and what they're there to do at the end that makes them want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if that thing at the end is save the world because it's where I keep all my stuff, that's 100% tangible.
Yeah, absolutely.
100% tangible, right?
And I'll tell you, from all my experience in gaming, there's no worse feeling as a player than losing sight of what that reward is.
Yeah.
Because then it feels like all stick, no carrot. You know? Because I find myself occasionally in certain games just going like, why are we doing this? Like, we got so wrapped up in we need to do steps A, B, and C that we forgot what D was, you know? What the end result was. Why are we putting so much energy into the thing that we're doing? Oh, so we can get X, Y, and Z. Okay. As long as we don't lose sight of that.
Yes.
You know?
And I do understand that there can be loops within loops, and you can lose sight when you're dealing with things like that. But one of the greatest feelings you can have as a storyteller is literally watching your players explain to each other why they're there, and knowing that everyone is on the right page, that they're comfortable, that they're driving toward the goal that's presented. Now, the question comes up then is, well, isn't this just railroading under a different way? And the answer is no, because you're not defining how they did it, how they get it done.
Right.
There's no loss to say, this is where, the mountain is there. You are here. You're wanting to get to the top of the mountain. Okay, good luck. I don't know how you're going to get there. I'm going to present challenges all along the way. And there's going to be something near the end, obviously.
Right. That's really I think that the key thing that I wanted to talk about here was
right.
is how do you reconcile this? Like, we've talked a lot about encounter design, right?
Yeah.
And what is the big advice we always give? You write situations,
not stories.
Not stories, not plots, right? So if you're
Sorry, I was just laughing. We're Storyteller Conclave, not Railroad Conclave.
Right, yeah. We could be Railroad Conclave. That's fine. Trains are awesome.
They're pretty cool.
But yeah, so if we're writing story situations, not plots, then how do you expect to then listen to this advice that we're giving out today and then come up with rewards and boss challenges and explore? How do you set all that stuff up, right? Now, we talked a little bit about how you want to keep your eye on the prize, sure, but I dare say that's where you need to start.
Yeah, start at the end.
Like, you literally start at the end and work your way backwards. So, in our little chain here of, so you've got your story that leads into the exploration and or combat, gathering of resources, to overcome the boss challenge, to get the reward. You start at reward, okay? This is what we call the plot hook. Okay, the players are presented, and this kind of goes back to like with your Red Dragon. Like, what do you want? What is the goal you're trying to seek? I mean, what? Sure, you've got the Red Dragon over there. The goal you want to seek is defeating it, but why?
Right.
Like, what are you achieving? What are you gaining? What is driving you?
Yeah.
Forward.
And it's as a group.
Yeah.
Like, you might have your own personal reasons that sit beyond that, but as a group, you will all recognize the main reason of why you're doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There has to be some sort of tangible reason that drives your players forward. And again, we usually call these plot hooks. Do you want the thing? Okay, well then you're going to have to go on the quest to get the thing. Okay, cool. We've already got the reward put out there.
Yep.
All right. And like I said, this reward can be intangible too. It can be something like peace between two warring nations, but it can also be things like inner peace.
Yeah.
If your character has an internal struggle going on because of some past trauma that they were through, maybe they need to, seek the advice and wise counsel of other people, resources, and maybe that end challenge is like a really trying situation where they have to confront the source of their trauma or something that represents it, so that they can experience the character growth on the other side of it and move past it. That's still the same loop. Yep. The reward is just inner peace, and the boss is your own emotions. But it's the same loop,
Yep.
So you start with the reward. What do you want? Then you can identify what stands in the way. And oftentimes the players will know this.
They'll sometimes present it without you saying a word.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, like if you going on this two warring factions thing, the reward is peace. What is the boss of it? Obviously, the rulers of the two factions.
And those who wish to keep it at war.
Exactly. Those who think that the status quo of war is where they need to be.
And again, your players will also present their opinions through their characters. Maybe your characters are very wise in the sense that it's a bunch of, it's probably the merchants trying to keep war profitable. That sounds like a decent thing. I would make an immediate note about that.
That sounds like something that wasn't in my notes before, but it is now.
Because and that's the thing is that extends the agency but doesn't change your target.
Exactly.
Theirs.
Your end goal is still peace.
Yeah.
They've just presented a possible obstacle that you've decided a yes and.
Yeah, so you don't have to think about, there's going to be, an assassin at the last minute who's going to try and take one of these people out. You don't even think about that.
Yeah.
Let them paint the initial picture and then present challenges to them from a perspective that makes sense for that world.
Now, what I will say is you will obviously want to give some thought into, structuring what I keep referring to as the boss encounter. But, understanding, like I said, that this could be a completely intangible thing, So, what is the chief obstacle they need to overcome to achieve their reward? Okay. You will want to think about ways that could possibly be circumvented. Okay. We say boss encounter, and maybe it is. Maybe it is just straight up a monster that you have to slay. This red dragon that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Maybe it is as simple as go fist fight a red dragon, you win, you get the loot.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to go with something simpler so we can talk about it with a direct reference that a lot of people probably has either seen or known. I'm going to talk about Baldur's Gate 3. It's been out for a number of months, and the opening segment, so I'm not spoiling anything here, is you're on a nautiloid that's crashing effectively.
Yep.
It's on fire, all kinds of shit's breaking loose, and the final scene of that is effectively already recognized. You're trying to get off of this thing. And you're presented with the controls. You're at the main control center, and there's a fight going on in the room. No one tells you what you have to do when you get into that room. It's a combat encounter that you can technically avoid, and probably should, considering who's all involved.
One of the mind flayers is like, Thrall, go activate the controls. That's the only instruction you're given. You're just thrown in with a bunch of enemies, and you're thrown in with a pretty strong demon, especially for your first level characters.
Correct.
And a mind flayer punching each other in the corner.
And you're like, okay, I shall go do this thing or not do this thing.
But again, you've got the agency to do it.
But that presentation of that situation to the players does not make any assumptions about what those players are going to do.
Exactly. And so
how it should be done.
On a bigger level, maybe you broker peace with the between these factions. Okay, to continue with this example,
sure.
To give you an example of a non-tangible, because we always look at boss encounters as like you have to kill the monster.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not always the case.
Let's give you a different example here. Okay. Maybe you broker the peace. Maybe that's the straight up combat answer to it.
Sure.
You know, of the just meet it head on. Get them both at the table, get them talking, get them to agree. Okay? Maybe you use guile to go around it. Okay? Maybe they like assassinate somebody and pin it on a third party and make them come together, you know, to agree to, you know, that third party is worse.
Yep.
It's underhanded as all hell.
A Watchmen effect, if you will.
But it's a solution
that
your
definitely...
players might come up with. You know, maybe they decide that peace isn't worth it, and they throw all their chips in with one side to try to win the war.
Yeah.
And just end the war that way, by victory rather than a compromise. You know, we're not saying you have to broker peace. We're saying peace is the objective, and that these two warring factions are the things that are standing in the way of it. How you handle it is not written. But when you do think of this loop, and how this loop might play out in your encounters, you're going to want to think about how the players might approach it. And just jot some notes for yourself. You're never going to know until you get there.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's
you're going to want a scaffolding.
Correct. And you're going to go challenge to challenge based upon how they react through those. Not to say that they won't have to just take a step back to get different resources if it was unsuccessful.
Sure.
You know, if maybe their first attempt was to try and get two of the families that cross over, that it's kind of a Romeo and Juliet situation that they believe they've got, you know, that they can help solve, doesn't work out. The roles don't happen, and now they're even more upset with each other. Okay, now they've got to take a different angle at it.
Sure.
So they take a step back to get different resources. It doesn't always have to be a success to get to the end of that, but they always have to remember that that's their end goal, is they've got to do something with these two factions, because at war right now, it puts everything at risk.
Now, one other thing I will mention, too, is that we are effectively talking about loops within loops.
Correct.
Okay, because what you just mentioned of, like, okay, maybe we want to try to get these two, you know, these two families to agree, which starts an inroad between these two factions. So the goal is peace between the families.
Right. So now
your reward is the beginning of an inroad. The goal, or the quote-unquote boss encounter, is two families making peace rather than two whole factions making peace. And we're just doing this on a micro scale.
We're stitching before we sew the whole line.
Exactly.
Yep. But again, every breakdown can do that. You can create your adventure packets within your campaign.
Yeah.
And those loops.
Yep.
And it still doesn't change the basic core mechanic of inciting into incident, complication, and resolution.
Yeah.
Like those are all going to be part of that every single time. But understanding that the players need to know without a shadow of a doubt their target so that they can feel accomplished when they get there with what their results were.
Exactly.
If I put a coin in the system and I pull the lever, I know there's a chance that a small chance that I will succeed on a great level, a minor chance that I'll get something, and it's still a chance that I will get nothing out of it.
I think more importantly, if it does come up all sevens, if it spit out a single quarter at you, you'd walk away.
Yeah. Because it says all over the front of the machine how I'm to win. All the ways I can win. It is obvious to me that that is my goal.
Right. So what is your main goal with a slot machine? You want the jackpot.
That's right.
Right.
Well, I want the money.
Yeah, you want the jackpot. You want to hit it big. You want that thing coughing out quarters for the next 5 solid minutes as it empties itself into buckets upon buckets of quarters for you. You know, that's the goal. That's the reward you're seeking, you know. And so if there isn't a significant payoff, if there isn't a tangible reward at the end, you know,
or one that meets my expectations along the route, even.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the lyric from the Tool song, The Patient.
Oh.
If there were no reward to reap, no loving embrace to see me through, this tedious path I've chosen here, I certainly would have walked away by now. And I still may.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that you also have to be prepared that if your characters have gone through a lot and not achieved their goal, talk to your players.
Yeah.
Be prepared to look at them and say, okay, what do you guys want to do? Because you don't have to hand them a victory.
No, but allowing them to feel like they've earned something, like their
Correct.
suffering was worth something.
Correct.
Is you've got to temper your downswings with upswings.
Yeah.
You know?
Failing forward is still something.
Exactly, because you still achieved something out of a failure.
Yeah.
You certainly had a setback. You had
Yeah.
a challenge to overcome. It cost you some resources, but you still got something out of it.
Yeah. And I see it as like the Avatar's uncle. Where he,
Uncle Iroh?
Yeah, Uncle Iroh was kind of look at thing, his view of the world, where he was just like, you still succeeded. I didn't succeed in anything that I did, but you've succeeded. You are different. You are changed and a better person. That's worth more to me than all the victories.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes that you need to have a character, an NPC, who sees that, who's just like, you know what? I'm going to give you guys a hand with this. You've worked really hard. You've really tried. You've made enough of an effort. You've made an impression on me. Maybe I'll have tea with him later this afternoon and we'll talk about something.
Sure.
And now you've stepped up something.
Yeah.
Because you've made an impression, and it shows the weight of what you've done. We see this with sword fighters, where it's like duels, where a duel after duel, the person feels like, they've made their way up, and the person is just like, could best them easily, but looks at him and goes, I can't duel you. Why? Because you have so much more to learn, and I can see so much potential. It'd be a waste. I'll give you a chance, but first you must learn. And it's like, oh, well, crap, that's kind of respectful, at that point.
That's right, you have been watching Blue Eye Samurai, haven't you?
I have. It's good.
It's so
it's
good.
Really good. It's really good. So what we're basically saying here is you're not railroading. You're scaffolding from the end. And you're presenting that golden apple that they want.
Yeah.
So that they feel the motivation to get it and present you on the way.
You're showing them a beacon on the distance. You're not telling them how to get there, or even making the path for them.
No, and again, as it becomes more obvious to them, their lips will present all of the challenges. They'll give them to you in many cases as they get deeper and deeper into their own situation of what is next. Doesn't mean that has to be exactly how it gets painted out. But it's wonderful to listen for the key phrases of like, oh, well, this is going to be a problem. That might just be a problem. Thank you for saying something.
Yeah, you might want to do something about that, yeah.
But we do have some questions.
Yeah,
and I think these questions are good questions for this, especially because they're a little thought-provoking.
Yeah, okay.
So Maddo Blooms asks, during one session, our GM had us going through a labyrinth. So every turn we would roll and the result would indicate if we were moving towards the exit or encountered a monster or other hazard. It was thrilling throughout. Are there any similar ways to utilize this sort of loop to deliver that same rush outside of rolling dice for combat?
I do want to clarify, though, we did have a little discussion with him on the side there and asked him a little more to explain what he felt was thrilling about the situation. I apologize if I'm getting your pronouns wrong, by the way. But the implication was essentially that it was a fail-forward sort of mechanic. That if they weren't moving towards the labyrinth, they were presented with a challenge, but they felt like they got something out of it.
Correct.
And that's I think is absolutely the key to the answer there. Like, the first thing you want to do when you've got something that is working for you in the game is identify what makes that magic happen. In this case, it was the excitement of the randomness of it. Some people find that frustrating. Some people find that exciting. This was clearly a case in which your players felt it was exciting. So definitely lean into that. And I think the important thing was that it wasn't a definite setback if the die roll didn't go your way. It was just a challenge, and you still progressed.
Yes. What this made me immediately think of was some digital games, where it's if you're doing the right combinations, you're just moving along and success is happening. But the moment you lose that, you're dropped into a mini game to try and get back to your point of success.
Oh, yeah.
It's that little, like, stair-step loop of, I'm moving, crap, am I going backwards? No, I succeeded in this thing. Now I can move forward again, Oh, crap, okay, now I'm down again, and back into the loop.
Yep.
And it's those mini things that kind of give you that chance to stand back up again and try. And that, I think, right there helps. For instance, I could see something like this fitting into dramatic tasks. Because a lot of times when you're doing a dramatic task, you're just stacking up tokens. And as it gets closer to the end, there's a point where it feels like, well, there's nothing we can do. We failed. Like, there's no way we can possibly succeed this. We just fail.
Yeah.
That's kind of a crashing reality. It kind of dumps you right out of the motivation in some ways.
In a sense.
Because, like, I can't succeed. I can't reach the reward that I was looking for. You know, I can't get what I need in this. And the point of this is that what this does within that mechanic is says, okay, you instead of doing everything as the final success point, it's saying that during that you can still gain something. You may not get to your end goal that you're at, but you gained something along the way.
Yeah.
Even
if it cost you resources, even if you had to do, like you said, kind of like a puzzle mini game,
Right.
You had to do a small combat or figure out, some sort of other complication, or maybe it just straight up cost you resources. There's at least some sort of an engaging mechanic with your players, and they feel like at the end of it they've done something about the failure.
Right, and it's still progressed the story.
Yeah.
You still get to move forward, because again, getting to the reward is the goal they want to get to. You must give them the opportunity to do so, unless you're just basically going to say, the punishment is failure, start over. At which point you're in a roguelike situation where you're just trying again in a different way. And if that's the way you want to run your table, there's nothing wrong with that. But the players need to understand that from the beginning, not when they're, 16 layers deep and they're like, what do you mean we have to start over? Like, just because we failed one or two rolls, we now have to start over? Okay, that's painful. That's beyond a doubt that's painful. Especially when you're very close to the end. How many people, when they're in the boss fight and get, TPK'd, are like, okay, well, what now? Right? We just lost everything.
Yeah.
Because a couple bad rolls, right? And now it's like, okay, well, how does that situation handle? And the answer is, what resources did they get up to that point that could change the outcome in a direction? Does someone come to and pull them out of the situation and present to them what happens? How far they got. Maybe it shifted the situation. Maybe the bad guy did get away with one of the things they were going to do, but there are now other opportunities that have come out of it to present a different way to get to the reward.
Yeah. And I think, for me, I think what it boils down to is absolutes.
Yes.
Right? Okay, you're talking about absolute victory or absolute failure.
Correct.
Absolute victory being the cakewalk where you walk in and there's no challenge whatsoever. Absolute defeat being that mythical TPK.
Correct.
And what you want is something that goes in somewhere in that nice little gray area in the middle. And it sounds like that's what you had. You had, it was random rolls. And that presented you with random, challenges that would come up. But those challenges were enough to pull you back towards failure, but not enough to just be like, you failed a roll, you lose.
Right. It's over. There's no way to win this.
It's just that made things more difficult for us. And then you've got that challenge. I think honestly, with most encounter design, this is always what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
I mean, I know personally, I as a storyteller, whenever I have like a combat encounter, I'm thinking like, so in one of my last games, I had an encounter set up where the players were talking to a dragon that was stuck in this alternate dimension, and he was imprisoned there by the lord of that dimension. Couldn't get out, and so basically he asked these people, after exchanged them some really valuable information he had, for killing him. He says, it's the only way that I'm able to get out of here. you can take my soul because of a special supernatural ability you have, and that'll smuggle me out of here. Like, all that'll be left is my bones, and honestly, my bones are pretty valuable to you, too, because you can make dragon bone weapons and armor out of them. And you're trying to hunt dragons, and that's going to be great for you.
Yep.
So if you kill me, that's going to be great for everyone involved.
Yep.
And so how I had the encounter set up is, once they started attacking the dragon, the lord of that realm was going to send his minions in to essentially, like, you would have to damage down the dragon while keeping all the incoming ads off of you for long enough. But I had a random roll chart that I was going to roll on to see which ads showed up.
Sure.
And, like, nothing showed up on the first turn, and, like, the bare minimum showed up on the second turn, and you guys had done so good in your rolls that, like, nothing really came out of it. It wasn't really a difficult challenge.
Right.
It turned out to be dramatic, and it was very meaningful for all the players involved from a story standpoint, but I wanted the combat encounter to be, you know, something that you guys kind of gritted your teeth over. I wanted you to be like, oh, wow, what are we going to do with all these monsters attacking us? How are we going to kill a massive dragon before these things swarm us, is what I wanted the stress of it to be. And it just didn't happen because some lucky die rolls on your guys' part,
very much so,
and some poor die rolls on my part, and I was disappointed by that because I wanted that tension, you know, and it didn't happen that way. And it's because I was unsuccessful in hitting that mythical middle spot of putting you in enough danger for it to be exciting, but not enough to go to an absolute where it's an absolute victory or an absolute defeat. You know?
Now, I will say the other encounter that we had during that same situation, similar situation, where basically we had to run across or move across a field of ballistas.
Oh, yeah, there was that.
That right there, I think, was more stressful.
Okay.
Because our chances of success were much lower.
In a sense, yeah.
I mean, if we had a player go down in the middle of that,
what would you do?
Right. Now we have a critical problem.
Yeah.
Like, how do you succeed when you're down some level of ability and resource? Like, how there wasn't anybody to talk to. We were dealing with a mechanical problem, right? And so it presented a level of challenge there that felt almost insurmountable if we didn't succeed. It was the Atreyu looking at the Southern Oracle. Like, you either succeed or fail,
or you get vaporized.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, game over right there. Do we just get ejected from Apocrypha at that point? Like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I
don't know. It didn't come up.
But it created a level of stress in that was there. Like, the presentation was there, and I think if I were to make a change to your situation, and this is, I thought about this much later, was you should have put chains on it, like pins and chains keeping the dragon in place, meaning he couldn't have left the area, and those chains are tied to things. Meaning, like, the moment that it gets attacked, they start to like, they've been there forever, but they start to turn, like, what are you doing, Dave?
Yeah,
like, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
and now we know, like, the Watchers are coming.
Right.
The things that are holding the dragon down are coming.
Yeah.
Look,
yeah.
That's a problem. Like, it's that doom clock that you missed, that element where we knew the doom was coming.
Yeah, I think I left the doom up to random chance, and then I rolled really low on the doom chance.
Right.
You know, and by then you'd done so much damage to the dragon. I'm like, if I throw monsters in now, I'm just literally delaying the inevitable.
Right.
And I should just let you guys have the victory, and we can move on to the next encounter. You know.
Yeah, I think that's where doom clocks come into those types of equations, is because when you need to ramp up tension, doom clocks do a great job because it is the bomb under the table that everyone knows about.
Yep.
It fills the gap of invisibility of the invisible problem.
Yeah.
And makes it visible. But again, coming back to Maddo Bloom, I like this. I like this a lot. I like being able to fail forward and feel each of those steps as you move through them.
Now, one thing I will say, and again, I don't know what happened at your table, and I don't know, what your group looks for out of an encounter. The only other thing that thought that crossed my mind about this is that I personally would have found this mechanic a little frustrating, I think.
Okay.
Because success is entirely up to random chance, and not up to the abilities of the players or the characters. Like, if you're navigating a labyrinth, I feel like my character should have something to do with that. Like, is there a puzzle-solving skill? Can I make an intelligence check to try to keep my bearings, or, a cartography skill? Or, depending on what system we're using, is there some way that my character can use their talents to engage with the labyrinth and make things easier? Or is it literally just up to the toss of a die?
And I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
I would agree with that statement.
But that's honestly my only other critique of that. And again, I cannot speak for what happened at your table. So
Right.
If it worked at your table and everybody found it thrilling, then you did the right thing.
Yep.
So,
well done. Well
awesome.
done.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
So Philly Fan tossed this in right before the show came on.
Well done.
Mostly unrelated to this week's topic, do you have any advice on running a system that both you and your group haven't played before? All right, so
I do, but I'll hear yours first.
my advice is immediately, first off, read the rule book, read it again. At least just the core bits. Most rule books have a how to run this game section in there. You should pay special attention to that, because that will tell you a lot of the things that the game wants you to think about and wants you to focus on. Okay. If you can find them, look up Let's Plays to see how other people have played it. Especially most devs nowadays are playing their own game.
Yeah. That's one of the funniest things, is watching a dev play their own game, because you'll look at it and go, are they playing that rule right? I've seen that a lot.
But other than that, though, I would say, set low expectations. And by that I don't mean expect your game to suck. I just mean keep your plot simple. Don't try to run a big epic 3-year campaign with, many different vicissitudes and plot twists and double crosses and red herrings. Just make it your first couple games should just be like, okay, here's some basic characters. Here's a basic problem that makes use of major set pieces in the story. We're going to just run the compulsion loop.
Yes.
You have a reward that you're seeking. There is a quest you must go on. There is a hill you must climb, and some sort of a thing you must overcome to get the reward. Congratulations, you're done.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said wholeheartedly, without a doubt. I have a hard time sometimes reading certain books because they're not designed for my reading, my consumption. My dyslexia doesn't help me.
Yeah.
It makes it very challenging to read through numbers and stuff. So I often find the Let's Plays kind of the first place that I go to.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm doing that. You might be lucky and find someone who's done a how-to play that is very short. Like, we found some that have been 5 to 10 minutes long for games that cut the game down to the skinny.
Oh, yeah.
And just tells you this is how you play the game.
Sean and I were trying to learn Star Trek by Modiphius, and we were looking at that exact content. Yes.
So I usually start there, but that's because that's the kind of style that I go through. I agree with keeping it simple. I think that is one of the best things that you can do in any game that you're starting out in. And I will take it to a second step further than that, is that I would even simplify the narrative that is being presented to your players. Give them make them all tied together. Give them a group, a troop, a militia, a school, whatever they're already bound to be around each other and required to be near. Simplify that process.
Yeah.
So that all they have to think about is their individualism and what profession effectively they're good at. What's the thing that they're professional at? So that they can lean into that interest that they have without thinking like, why am I hanging out with this dude? Well, the answer is you have 2 study halls with him and a geography class. Okay, we're friends at schoolmates at some level.
Yeah.
There's your answer, right? But the thing is that you've already given them the first step of reasoning to be together, the basic bonds. You can then ignore the rest of that and basically say, okay, guys, here's what you've been tasked to do. You need to solve this simple problem, this meat and potatoes problem.
Yeah.
Here's the direction you've been pre-motivated in the way to that milk run design. Here is the car. You must drive it there, pick up the milk, and come back. Bring me the milk. That is the simplest thing you can do with your players for the very first adventure. It should be as milk run as humanly possible. And then you, as the storyteller, can work through all of the mechanics with them. Let them explore their skills, if that's what's in it. Combat, if that's what's in it.
That's what I was going to say.
Move through all of the mechanics with them so that they can confound you as the storyteller of, well, can I do this? And you're like, yes. Let's look. Sure. Let's do it that way. Because that will happen every time.
Yeah, that was going to be my last piece of advice there is look at all the core mechanics presented to you by the game system. So, like in Savage Worlds, there's dramatic tasks, there's combat, there's chases, and there's interludes. Those are basically like the big four. There's like rules for mass combat and stuff like that, and there's some other little fiddly things in there. And if you're playing Deadlands, there's duels and whatnot. But like those are probably the big four: interludes, combat, chases, and dramatic tasks.
Yep.
I would say try to do a simple version of all of those. Specific to the game system that you're playing.
Correct.
Obviously. Try to do look at all the core mechanics it presents you and try to do something simple with all of them. If you're playing Star Trek, they've got ships. Ships are involved because it is a ship-based, a story. So, obviously there's going to be maybe some ship combat. So maybe you get in a tussle with a Romulan warbird. Okay? Maybe, but again, doesn't have to be a big thing. Doesn't have to be a huge diplomatic incident. You have a neutral zone skirmish.
Yeah.
And that's it, just to test out the rules.
So, look, the first thing I always think of when I'm going to say you need to do a certain type of combat is one of the best things that can happen in combat is a situation where your players don't want to kill the people. Right? Like, it's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, because then they start looking for options.
And that is a great way to start
Yeah.
with combat in your world, especially if combat isn't meant to be deadly. 7th is a game of honor and of respect and things like that, where everyone is trying to stay up and up. Their words may cut harder than the swords that they carry on their hip. But the point is, you don't want your players walking around with their pistols, pulling them out to shoot people in the face. That's not something... A duel happens.
Oops.
Yes, I have murder hobos in my party at times. But the point is that the players, if they want to present themselves as scallywags and cutthroats who are going to go around and pull pistols on people, understand that that is the tone of the game. And present them with that tone. On the other hand, if you're a bunch of Federation people and you're going to an outpost and along the way your comms get messed up and two vessels show up and start shrieking things over comms that you can't understand because your translator's down, and then one of them opens fire across your hull, and you're like, okay, we can't shoot at these guys. We're going to open up a diplomatic nightmare. What are we going to do? And now you have a situation that involves all of the components, and your players have to think around the problem.
Yes.
So generating these types of events, giving your players the chance to go through the basic story mechanics of whatever the game presents is important. Like in 7th, I would make sure there would be at least one duel. I would have that presented because it helps the swordsmen who have those skill sets see what their skill sets can do. And also teaches them the honor that's necessary, how those types of fights happen. And then, sure, have them go have a brute squad show up to try and rough them up.
Right, introduce them to the brute squad mechanics.
Correct, and how does that get played out?
I was just thinking Cyberpunk Red, have your fixer set up a job. Have that job involve some sort of a computer, thing that they have to do so that your hacker has something to do. Have a firefight breakout so that your gunner has something to do, Put something in there so they can explore all of those base mechanics just on a simplistic level. You can all get used to the game system, and then you can really dig your teeth in once you all feel comfortable.
Exactly. And don't worry so much about making sure that everyone at the table gets a spotlight in these things. Some people are going to be stressed out as they're stepping up to this because they don't need to be in the limelight, but they're listening. They're trying to engage. They're doing their best to try and figure out the mechanics because it's not their strong point. The worst thing you can do is force them into the limelight during that time. Don't worry about the narrative. Don't worry about them being in character. Milk runs are meant to be mechanic walkthroughs, effectively.
Yeah, we're getting used to the system. We'll figure out the role.
They may hate their character at the end of it and be like, "Oh, this is not what I wanted it to be at all."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about what you want to be then.
Yeah,
and just do rewrites.
I think my last piece of advice too is that it was just on the tip of my tongue and then it went away. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I can present.
Oh no, I got it. If you have rules questions pop up at the table, do not take the time to dig through the book and look them up.
Mm-hmm.
Jot them down, make a table ruling, and figure them out later.
Mm-hmm.
You're just and get your players buy-in on that too. I mean, be very open with them. Like, look, guys, this is new system to all of us, especially me as the storyteller. I'm going to be making rule calls on the fly here. Some of them may be wrong, but we're going to jot them down and we're going to figure them out as we go, and we'll get them right next time.
Yep.
You know,
I agree with that.
But keep the flow of the story going, because honestly, even for a first game where everybody's learning, nothing breaks that up more than pulling out a rule book.
The last thing I'm going to say, because I tend to come things from a narrative aspect, is don't tell your story in your milk run. Don't present it. Present the world. Show them what the world feels like.
Yes.
Present the people of the world that are out there. Don't get into detail. They don't need to know about every duke and king and the head of the guard. Those names are irrelevant to them during this.
Yep.
All they should know about in this is how the world should feel, how the world moves, and how it breathes, how it reacts to them.
And what their character's place is in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're more getting used to their own character than they are the world.
Right. So, again, super simple plot, or super simple adventure, cut and dry. You should not be thinking and coming up with shit on the fly to try and make it challenging. None of that.
Yep. Don't complicate it.
Don't complicate it. Just present your world in a nice, wonderful landscape.
Here's a thing. Here's an obstacle standing in front of the thing. Go get the thing.
Yes.
There you go.
Yep.
Done.
There you go.
That's your adventure.
Hope that helps.
All right. Next week's topic.
It's December.
It's December already.
It's December, Sarah. We have gone 12 months, and this is our last Storyteller 202.
This is our last Storyteller 202, yeah. So we are circling back around to creating lifelike NPCs.
We are. We've talked about NPCs a number of times, and kind of what you can do with them, and how they can breathe in a world.
But you know, I think it's always one of those topics that we can always come back to and always add more.
There's something
discussion.
deeper, especially in the thing that got me about this and making them lifelike is the one part that the really when you get into 202 is how do you immerse your players with those NPCs?
Yeah,
you do a great job of making that very personal. Mm-hmm. You have a certain way of weaving an NPC into a PC's existence through relationship, through conversation, through remembering things.
Yeah.
And all of that is chef's kiss, just fantastic.
Well, thank you, Rob.
So next week we're gonna just highlight what are the
we're gonna hand Sarah a microphone and just let her ramble for an hour.
I think I'm literally gonna sit here and put praise upon some of your better NPCs.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And hopefully hear some of I'll make a list of some of mine that you can still remember.
Yeah,
because it's been a hot minute since I've run a couple NPCs. But in any case, we hope you guys will return and continue listening.
Well, anyways, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us on our Discord. We'd love to hear from you there. Join the discussion. Tell Rob about the 7C game that you're about to start running and watch him break into tears of joy. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who help support us every month, and you can too on Patreon. Please do. Especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet, The Arcane Asylum, Veteran, Hulavu, Sam, Sean, and Sparkle Motion. We appreciate all of your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems or on YouTube or Instagram at Arcane Anthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on YouTube as well. And our outro music, which is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mirror Machine, you can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who've sat at our tables who give you these great stories to share with you over the years. And you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys.
Good night.